Memorandum for Deputy Director of Operations, via Operations Officer Robert Saetern, December 20, 1996. This is a briefing on DP-MSL technological developments. In addition to the brief memorandum dated December 9th that described our initial involvement in the case, this report provides a more comprehensive analysis following further investigation. As referenced in the previous memorandum, in parallel with the Institute's report to the Japanese government, one of the 5 participants of the DP-MSL, a study for decoding and preservation of mental synaptic languages, died within the Institute's facilities as a result of what we can now confirm was heart failure, possibly due to a previously undetected cardiomyopathy. In response to this incident, the Institute Board of Directors, along with Dr. Kunimochi, the Director of DP-MSL Research, decided to notify the Japanese government of what had happened. They promptly dispatched officials to the Institute's facilities to assess the situation and take the necessary steps to prevent a potential diplomatic incident. The report on what happened within the facilities reached us thanks to the cooperation of an FBI legal attaché, John Hirayama, who has been monitoring the Institute's activities along with other similar organizations since 1994 with the intent of preventing another possible Toshiba Kongsberg case in Iran. Despite the brevity of the report, we assessed that the case constituted sufficient grounds to contact the Japanese authorities, who cooperated cordially and granted us access to the Institute's facilities, where the 5 study subjects were still connected to the device referenced in the previous memorandum. Following the formal agreement with the Japanese authorities and the Shizuoka Prefecture, the Institute made the area designated for DP-MSL studies available to us with the cooperation of the Board of Directors and the project's main investigators. Immediately, our team began an extensive filming process of all the facility, along with testimonials from those involved. After a thorough evaluation, this material will be sent as an attachment to this memorandum for reference, along with the corresponding documents. To date, since the last memorandum, we have not been able to safely disconnect the remaining subjects. Despite advancements under the intensive care unit, 2 of the subjects, Kazuya Murakami and Oliver O'Reilly, have begun to show signs of vital deterioration, despite the contradictory presence of strong neuronal activity. To fully understand the current situation, it is necessary to examine the functioning of the device in question, referred to as TH-Brain by its developers, on a technical level. The information presented below is primarily based on the testimony of Dr. Kunimochi. The DP-MSL investigation that initiated in 1994 was the continuation of a previous paper titled Study for Cerebral Wave Analysis and Electrical Synaptic Activity. Well, for the purposes of this recording, I'll be referring to it as the C1 investigation, or C1. Alright, let's continue. The C1, that was authored by the same research team, began in late 1991 and concluded with satisfactory results in 1993. Following the success of this research, Kunimochi initiated a new study, the aforementioned Decoding and Preservation of Mental Synaptic Languages, with the hope of expanding the base of analysis and technical development. However, the request for government subsidy was denied, likely due to the current recession or a growing distrust towards the doctor's judgment, which I will discuss further on. Due to this lack of financial support, the team was forced to seek private investors. A close friend of the doctor, Hanzo Nakamura, who later became part of the investor group, arranged a private meeting with his most influential contacts in hopes of securing the necessary funding. The meeting was successful. During that meeting, Kunimochi met Georgi D. Kostov, a Bulgarian financier who showed great interest in the project, providing the majority of the total investment and remaining present during the development of the research, not as a participant, but as an observer, despite having suggested the participation of one of the study subjects, Jancik Helia, the son of a married couple, close to the businessman. A brief report on Kostov was provided to us by Hirayama, whose informants regularly monitored visits to the Institute by foreign members. Generally speaking, Kostov appears to be clean. The businessman thrived in the last decade thanks to a significant investment in the shares of Zentiva, a Czech pharmaceutical company, and his efforts to start his own medical firm in his home country. Beyond the obvious connection to his daughter, Elena Kostova, a pharmaceutical engineer graduated from the UCTM in Sofia, he appears to be solely dedicated to project financing and lacks any title or experience, suggesting a direct involvement in the technical development of the DPMSL. His indirect participation seems minor, but will gain importance, according to Kunimochi's late testimony. After securing research funding through Nakamura's contacts, the Institute launched a small campaign to recruit 20 test subjects, including the aforementioned Jansig Veritz Helia, recommended by Kostov. Kazuya Murakami, who is still connected to this device, and 18 other individuals, mostly of Japanese origin, whose names will be attached to the memorandum documents. At the moment, these do not seem relevant to the case, although the possibility that their participation may have slightly altered the extent of the database cannot be ruled out yet. After completing the legal preparations and providing a thorough explanation of the process, the subjects participated in short one-hour sessions of neural interaction and reading, where they were sedated and connected externally via surface electrodes to the receivers of a device capable of encoding and storing the information in an extensive database. This was a long and costly process that, it should be noted, was considerably less intrusive than later methods and yielded positive results without any apparent side effects on the participants. Despite the slowness of this process, the research continued to bear fruit. However, money began to run out in late 1995, and the doctor was once again forced to seek private investments. After a phone conversation with Nakamura, Kunimochi managed to contact Isao Iwasaki. This is the executive director of Onyxware, a newly established video game company looking for innovative ways to insert themselves into the market. Iwasaki showed great interest in the research from then on and maintained a close relationship with the doctor. This idea of a peripheral device capable of deepening interactions in organic ways attracted Iwasaki, who was about to launch Onyxware's first title, a life simulation video game titled Green Valley, and repeatedly asked Kunimochi to implement the findings of his research. Seeing it as a great opportunity to attract potential investors, Kunimochi, with Nakamura's help, invited the executive directors of various development companies in Japan, where the doctor presented the idea, demonstrated the results of his research, and requested an initial financial advance from those interested, with the promise of adapting those results to a peripheral capable of expanding the capabilities of the PlayStation console. Once again, Nakamura's influence facilitated the necessary funds for the continuation of the project. However, Kunimochi decided to temporarily pause the research to work on the development of the device, requesting assistance from his colleagues at the Institute and the eventual presence of Ken Kutaragi, one of the main engineers behind the original PlayStation console, to supervise the compatibility and functionality of the adapter. After 5 months in development, a preliminary prototype of this adapter was finally built. Leveraging the database from previous DPMSL studies, this prototype showcased the peripheral's functionalities to the investment group. Essentially, this device would assist the PlayStation console by increasing its computing power, and it was capable, thanks to its extensive neurological data, of adapting images to low polygonal 3D models, generating its own sequences, audio and text, extending environments in organic ways, assembling complex puzzles using objects from the host game, creating and altering animations in 3D spaces, etc. The development team also added a module equipped with the robust virtual library, mostly composed of public domain texts, along with some songs and movies, to cover any potential gap in the data. Despite the success of this meeting, the largest contributor, Iwasaki, who had originally convinced the doctor to develop the device, remained skeptical about its capabilities and suggested that the team should deepen the data collection with a larger number of study subjects. Kunimochi agreed, but delivered several copies of this prototype to various investors for subsequent adaptation to games with upcoming releases, assuring that any future changes could be incorporated into the software without major issues and would only increase the device's effectiveness upon the commercial launch. After the meeting, the research team added 10 study subjects to the group, and by resuming the learning sessions, they sought to reinforce the database's efficiency. However, after an additional 3 months of study, Iwasaki remained dissatisfied with the results, and the other investors began to grow impatient with the doctor. Under pressure from investors and with funds running low, Kunimochi requested more time and considered the implementation of a method theorized in the previous paper, the C1. This method involved a deeper collection of neuronal data through a faster but more intrusive process. The procedure consisted of a surgical intervention on the study subject under prolonged general anesthesia. A tiny incision would be made in the prefrontal cortex to access the frontal lobe and temporarily install receivers capable of storing information related to higher cognitive functions, temporal perception, and subconscious activity. Additionally, the reading device would need to be adjusted to manage the distribution of chemical elements to keep the participants synchronized with the device's processing speed. That means, once the operation began, the device's software would manage not only the collection of neuronal information, but also the temporal perception speed of the study subjects, based on its changing processing speed. This function, although risky, would allow the research team to significantly increase the number of interactions. Using this method and considering the surgical intervention times, the session would last about 8 hours, with more than 7 of them being dedicated to neuronal study for data collection. However, thanks to this alteration of temporal perception, the study subjects could experience the session, depending on the device's processing speed, as if it lasted days or even months. Given the intrusive nature of this procedure, many of the study subjects decided not to renew their contracts with the Institute. However, Jansik Varet's Helia, recommended by Kostov and Kazuya Murakami, whose family still needed the money, remained in the project under the presumption that the risk associated with the sessions would be minimal in the event of an unforeseen incident. The Institute once again began recruiting study subjects, but this time with the goal of achieving a more extensive and diverse data collection. To broaden the search range, recruitment was conducted internationally, and according to Hirayama's reports, almost clandestinely. As a result, 3 new members were integrated into the team: the aforementioned Oliver O'Reilly from Ireland, Matthias Crespo from Argentina, and Claude Delafoy from France. All members of this new team, with the exception of Kazuya, who originally joined at 17 but has since turned 18, are young teenagers, and some of them have pre-existing health conditions or disabilities. Matthias Crespo is deaf-mute. Claude Delafoy suffers from stage 3B, small cell lung cancer, and Kazuya Murakami has multiple congenital malformations caused by inherited effects of radiation exposure. Nevertheless, none of them suggest an immediate risk of death. Shortly after completing the legal paperwork, the 3 new members, along with their accompanying family members, were transferred to Japan, and they were given 2 weeks to get to know each other, build a relationship with the research team, understand the session procedures, and set up their rooms at the Institute. The first joint session took place on Tuesday, November 19th. The 5 participants were anesthetized and connected with the help of a professional medical team to the reading device, which had been enhanced to increase its processing capacity. Additionally, the research team added new modules for this series of data training, which contained games released for the PlayStation console, along with other unfinished games that would be compatible with the device upon its eventual commercial release. These modules also contained a large number of movies, musical pieces, and texts no longer in the public domain that had been added to capture the participants' stimuli and improve the organic generation of multimedia files. Many of these files had cultural significance to the participants and would not be part of the official commercial release. The device was also connected to a PlayStation console, which remained on from the beginning to the end of the process. The console ran a modified version of Green Valley, reconfigured to facilitate access to the new multimedia files through a game function that had originally been programmed to generate and play more primitive files. Although the console managed the game processes, its operation was not crucial, and turning it off or restarting it would not interrupt the session, nor would it pose a risk to the participants. Despite this, the necessary surgical intervention to link them to the device would be rigorously monitored, with special attention given to the first and last steps of the operation, since an unforeseen interruption in the system could cause irreparable damage to the participants' psyches. This is primarily due to the chemical administration system that allows the device to regulate temporal perception. For this reason, the software managing this process must check the patient's status and subsequently approve or deny the request to synchronize the patients to safely disconnect them before ending the operation. The first session was successful, and the researchers managed to triple the amount of data collected so far in just one attempt. After verifying the effectiveness of this method, another session was scheduled a week later, Tuesday, November 26, with similar results, and a third for the following week, Thursday, December 5. However, during the second hour of this last session, a fatal incident occurred. 2 hours and 16 minutes into the third session, one of the study subjects, Jansig Varicella, suffered a fatal arrhythmia, likely triggered by the halothane agent used in the anesthesia process. According to his mother's medical history, we can estimate that it was due to a hereditary hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The possibility that the device caused this is not entirely ruled out, but it seems unlikely. The medical team acted quickly to interrupt the operation, but the software responsible for disconnecting the participants did not respond favorably, denying the request. The sudden interruption of the link posed a significant risk to the other subjects, so they attempted to operate on Jansug without disconnecting them. This prevented them from using the defibrillator, and lacking in options, they could not assist Jansug, who died 3 minutes later. While the team debated on how to proceed, and the device continued to reject requests to disconnect the other subjects, they noticed that Jansug's readings not only remained active, but had collected a copious amount of data during those critical minutes. This fluctuating data collection continued for approximately 9 minutes after his passing. After officially pronouncing him dead, the Institute's board of directors chose to inform the Japanese authorities, triggering the events that lead to our involvement in the case. Regarding what happened to Jansug and his post-mortem neuronal activity, Kunimochi refused to make any statements initially. However, after a more in-depth interrogation, the doctor admitted to having a theory about the possible cause of this phenomenon. Though it should be noted, he did not seem comfortable discussing the topic. Kunimochi mentioned that during that initial 1994 meeting organized by Nakamura, he met Kostov and later convinced him to join the group of investors. The businessman seemed amazed by the promises of the DPMSL, and despite understanding the concepts in a very rudimentary way, he became enamored with the possibility of visualizing life after death. In a private conversation, Kostov offered to fully finance the research on the condition that the team agreed to conduct a test on a dying subject once the research had advanced enough. Kunimochi was uncomfortable with this condition, but considering that this contribution would allow the research to begin without further issues, he accepted, betting that Kostov would eventually abandon the idea. However, the businessman not only persisted, but over the years became more insistent, applying increasing pressure on the doctor, repeatedly threatening to withdraw funds entirely. Under the pressure of these threats, and knowing that Kostov would not relent, Kunimochi decided to incorporate a conditional instruction into the software programming that would allow the experiment to be carried out in the distant future without reconfiguring the whole program or interfering with other lines of code. This condition would trigger by detecting the patient's vital readings in their final moments, and it was designed to keep the patient's brain functions active for as long as possible, effectively extending the brain's functional lifespan for a few extra minutes, and thus collect and interpret these readings within the system sequentially. Kunimochi assured us that this conditional instruction was not active at the time of the operation. However, so far it seems the only feasible explanation. Regarding this software block preventing us from safely disconnecting the remaining 4 subjects, we still do not have a definitive answer. However, the research team theorizes that it could be related to the enormous amount of information that Kazuya Murakami and Oliver O'Reilly have recently started to generate. 2 days ago, we managed to stabilize the temporal perception issue by modifying the external hardware of the device. Essentially, we removed some components that enhance performance, forcing the maximum processing speed to a pace similar to standard human perception. However, considering the age difference between the youngest subject, Matthias Crespo, who is 9 years old, and the oldest, Kazuya Murakami, 18 years old, The research team suggests that, without the individual administrative aid provided by the software, it is not advisable to disconnect them yet, as there exists a minor difference in time perception between children and adults. Currently, there is no exact way to know how much time has passed in the subjects' minds. But thanks to the device readings, we estimate it was around 3 months. After applying these modifications, the subject's temporal perception should have stabilized to a 1-to-1 ratio with ours. Additionally, we have reprogrammed the internal clock to correct the date of the days. As proof of this, the Green Valley session hosted on the PlayStation is no longer a rapid, incomprehensible sequence of events, but has stabilized completely. It is even possible to interact with the game without further issues. Regarding the participants' experience, the researchers are unaware of what transpires in their minds while the console remains off. However, when the game is running, it is estimated that they live an experience similar to a dream. During this state, the subconscious seems to generate images and sounds that emulate their assigned characters' sensations quite accurately. They do not see polygons or pixels, but a very close representation, structurally based on their personal experiences, which can vary from person to person. Having said this, we are working closely with the research team to individually synchronize the subjects and disconnect them as safely as possible. However, there is growing concern within the team for Kunimochi's health. He has not left the premises since the December 5th incident and has barely left the operating room, except to use the restroom or sleep for very brief periods. The assistance he has provided to the case is remarkable, but according to his colleagues' testimonies regarding his behavior prior to the studies, we are evaluating his retirement. In the local scientific community, there has been great uncertainty about the doctor's mental state for some years. He seems to have drastically changed his professional attitude after the death of his only daughter, Mai Kunimochi, in 1989. His close colleagues testify that, after a long period of inactivity, he returned with controversial ideas about the use of technology for the artificial extension of life expectancy and human consciousness. He also confirmed this in his testimony when we discussed Kostov's proposal. Initially, he rejected the idea of conducting the experiment because, according to his own words, his goal was to extend life, not to study death. Therefore, if the experiment were conducted, he planned to delegate the operation's supervision to an institute colleague. Thanks to Hirayama's brief report, we also know that in the early days of DPMSL, the doctor frequented a small cult community in southern Shizuoka with a particular interest in life perpetuation. It is possible that he had visited this community numerous times before being followed, extending to the days of C1, or even earlier than that. For these reasons, combined with his recent behavior, we are evaluating his continued involvement in the case, and any developments regarding this will be reported in the next memorandum. Regarding our operation, and considering the cultural relevance of the case, I'll take this opportunity to request the assistance of an agent versed in French and Argentine cultures, who can also speak English and Japanese fluently, to communicate with me and the Institute's assigned team. Any agent meeting these requirements will be beneficial to the case. It's worth mentioning that our team is in close contact with the affected companies to provide financial compensation for the duration of this process, emphasizing the importance of keeping the matter confidential for diplomatic reasons. We are also in talks to hold the release of the winter issue of Game G Hayo magazine, which features a written interview with an institute's representative discussing the device. As a final note, I would like to remind you that an electrical failure at the facility could easily cause irreparable damage to the participants and prematurely end our operation. Keeping this in mind, we might need some external support. Considering the future possibility of having to transport the patients without disconnecting them, we believe the best option would be a modified motorhome to accommodate all 4 subjects, spacious enough for the medical team to work efficiently. A document with the specific measurements of the device and its technical specifications will be sent shortly.